He was just a window cleaner. Nobody looked at him twice. But one morning, he looked through the wrong window and saw something that broke him open. His wife's face, in a gold frame, in the building of the family. That killed her. He raised his daughter alone for 20 years. No help, no family, no answers. Just a man, a little girl, and a grief he never fully understood, because nobody ever told him the truth about the morning his wife died. He blamed himself. Every single day, he thought it was his fault. But today, on the morning he dropped his daughter off for her first day at her dream job, he walked into a lobby he was never supposed to enter, and saw a face he has spent 20 years missing, staring back at him from a gold frame. His wife's face, in the building of the very family that had disowned her, renamed her, erased him, and something inside this quiet, patient, broken man finally snapped. What he didn't know was that somewhere on the 42nd floor of that building, a woman had been waiting for exactly this moment for 20 years, with an envelope and a secret so dark, so devastating, that it would not only destroy the most powerful family in Chicago, it would finally explain why his coffee tasted different that morning. Welcome to Sterling Stories, where every story we tell is built on real emotion, real struggle, and real justice. If you're new here, you found the right place. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss a story like this one. And drop a like. It takes 1 second, and it means everything to us. All right? Now let's get into it, because this story will change the way you see everything. The alarm went off at 4:45 a.m., same as it did every morning, and Elias Vance was already awake. He'd been awake since 3, lying on his back in the dark, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that had been there since 2019, and that he kept meaning to fix, and never did. It had spread slightly over the years, that stain, taken on a shape that, depending on the light and his mood, looked either like a map of somewhere he'd never been, or like nothing at all. He reached over and silenced the alarm before it could finish its first buzz. Old habit. Maya was a light sleeper. He lay there another minute, just breathing, just being in the stillness before the day made its demands. Then he got up. The kitchen was small but clean. Elias kept it clean the way some men kept a workshop clean, with a kind of quiet discipline that was less about tidiness and more about control. When you didn't have much, you kept what you had in order. That was something his father had told him, and his father's father before that, and it was the kind of wisdom that sounded simple until you understood how much it cost. He filled the coffee maker, stood watching it drip, didn't drink any. He hadn't drunk coffee in 20 years. He made himself a cup of black tea instead, the way he did every morning, and stood at the kitchen window while the city outside began its slow, gray shift from night to early morning. Chicago in February was a particular kind of brutal. Wind that came off the lake like it had a personal grievance. Cold that settled into your bones before you made it from the door to the car. Elias had grown up here. He'd long since stopped expecting the city to be gentle. He sipped his tea and thought about the day ahead. Maya's first day at Sterling Architects. He turned the name over in his mind the way you turn something sharp over with your fingers, carefully, aware of the edges. Sterling Architects. Sterling. The name his wife had been born with. The name she'd set down willingly, joyfully, the day she married him, like a bag she'd been carrying too long and was relieved to finally leave on the ground. The name her family had tried to use like a weapon against both of them. He rinsed his mug and went to get dressed. He was on the 34th floor of the Meridian Tower by 5:50 a.m., harness checked and double-checked, squeegee in hand, the city laid out below him in the thin pre-dawn light. This was his 4th year doing window work. Before that, 2 years on a construction crew. Before that, a brief, humiliating stint doing catering for corporate events. a job he'd quit after being asked 3 times in 1 month to use the service entrance when arriving at buildings he was helping to service. Before all of that, he'd been a chef. Not just a chef. He'd been the chef at Rosario's on Michigan Avenue, the kind of restaurant that people made reservations for 6 weeks in advance. He'd run that kitchen from the age of 24, built the menu from scratch twice over, trained 11 people who'd gone on to open their own places. He had been, by every honest measure, exceptional at what he did, and he had known it. Not arrogantly, but with the quiet, grounded confidence of a man who had put in the work and earned the right to stand behind it. He'd lost all of that before he turned 30, not through any failure of his own. He needed to remember that on the mornings when the memory came at him sideways and he couldn't quite outrun it. It hadn't been his failure. It had been Eleanor Sterling's money and Eleanor Sterling's connections and Eleanor Sterling's pathological refusal to accept that her daughter had chosen a black man from the South Side and wasn't coming back. She'd moved quietly through Chicago's old money networks like a current moving through water, invisible on the surface, but pulling everything in its direction underneath. The lease at Rosario's suddenly became complicated. The building owner, a man named Hargrove, who'd always been friendly, stopped returning calls. A health inspection arrived with unusual thoroughness and found violations that hadn't existed the week before. The investors who'd been talking to Elias about backing his own place suddenly had other priorities. Within 8 months, Rosario's was finished. Elias had spent 20 years putting the math together slowly, piece by piece, the way you assemble something in the dark, by feel, by logic, by the shape of what kept fitting together. He'd never had proof. Not the kind you could take into a room and lay on a table. But he knew. The way you know things that people with power over you are counting on you not being able to prove. He moved the squeegee in long, steady strokes, left to right. The glass cleared before him like fog burning off. His phone buzzed. "Dad, I can't sleep." Her voice was soft, the way it got when she was trying not to sound like she was scared. Maya had always done that, tried to sound smaller than her fear so that the fear wouldn't seem real. Maya. He smiled, surprising himself. "It's not even 6. I know what time it is." He could hear her in the kitchen, the creak of the floorboard she'd been meaning to fix, the sound of the refrigerator opening and closing without anything being taken out of it, a nervous habit she'd had since she was 12 years old. "First day jitters," he said. "I'm 21, Dad. I don't get jitters. You're rattling around the kitchen at 5 in the morning. A pause. I might be a little nervous." He let her have that, let the silence sit warmly for a moment. "What if I'm not ready?" she said, and something in her voice dropped, the performance of composure falling away like a coat off a hook. Underneath it was just his daughter, 21 years old, about to walk into a building that bore the name of the family that had destroyed her parents' lives, carrying the weight of everything he'd never been able to fully explain to her and everything she'd figured out on her own. "You got the internship," he said. "Getting it and being good at it aren't the same thing." "No," he agreed. "They're not. But you know what your mama used to say about that?" The quiet on the other end changed texture. It became something slower, something that breathed differently. "She used to say that feeling unprepared is just respect wearing a different coat," Elias said. He kept his voice steady. He'd had 20 years of practice keeping his voice steady when he talked about Sarah. "She used to say that the only people who walk into something new feeling completely ready are the ones who don't understand what it is they're walking into." He paused. "You understand. That's not weakness, baby. That's intelligence." A sound from the other end that might have been a laugh or might have been something else. "I miss her," Maya said. Simple. Quiet. Dropped into the conversation like a stone into water. Elias looked out at the city. The sunrise was beginning now, a red seam opening along the eastern edge of the skyline, spilling light across all that glass, turning the towers from gray to copper to pale gold. Beautiful in the way Chicago sometimes surprised you into finding it beautiful just when you'd decided you were too tired for it. Yeah, he said. Me too. Every single day. He hung up and went back to his glass. He thought about Sarah on the way down from the 34th floor, the way he always thought about her on descents. Not intentionally, but the way the mind moves towards certain things when the body is occupied with something mechanical. Sarah Sterling, who had walked into Rosario's on a Friday night in 1998 because her college roommate had a reservation, and she'd been dragged along, not particularly interested, still wearing her coat when she sat down because she'd planned to leave early. She'd ended up staying 3 hours, ordered 4 courses, left a note with the hostess that said, simply, "Tell the chef he makes food that makes people want to stay." He'd kept that note. He still had it somewhere, in the box under the bed with her photographs and Maya's baby things, and the lease from the Michigan Avenue apartment where they'd lived the happiest 2 years of his life. She'd come back the next Friday, and the Friday after that. By the 3rd visit, he'd come out of the kitchen himself, something he almost never did, because he wanted to see the face that matched the notes she kept leaving. She'd been beautiful, but that wasn't the first thing that hit him. The first thing was the way she looked at him. Directly, completely, without any of the social machinery that most people kept running between themselves and strangers. Like she'd already decided he was worth her full attention and wasn't going to waste his time or hers pretending otherwise. He'd been lost inside of 30 seconds and had the self-awareness to know it. They'd dated for 7 months. Her family had not been informed for the first 3 because Sarah had known, with the clear-eyed realism of someone who had grown up inside that particular kind of privilege and understood exactly what it was. That once Eleanor Sterling had an opinion, no amount of reality could dislodge it. She'd wanted them to be solid first. She'd wanted something that couldn't be shaken before she let the shaking begin. When Eleanor found out, she'd offered Sarah an ultimatum that was so coldly delivered, so stripped of any maternal warmth that Sarah had reportedly laughed. Not out of cruelty, but out of the shocked, clarifying laughter of someone whose last illusion has just been removed. She'd chosen Elias. Without drama, without hesitation, without a backward glance. The Sterlings had responded by making the backward glance as painful as they could. He picked Maya up at 8:15. She was standing outside their building in her charcoal blazer with her portfolio bag over her shoulder, and the morning light hit her face in such a specific way that Elias had to grip the steering wheel hard for a moment before he could put the car in park. She looked so much like her mother that it still caught him off guard after 21 years. The cheekbones, the shape of her eyes, the way she stood when she was nervous, perfectly still, chin slightly up, one hand in her pocket, the stillness of someone who is absolutely not going to let you see how much is moving underneath. She got in, immediately pulled out her phone, then put it away, then looked out the window. "You don't have to drive me," she said. "I know. I'm an adult. I know that too." She looked at him. A small, reluctant smile appeared. "You're impossible." Guilty. They drove in comfortable silence for a while. The city moved around them, the morning rush already thickening on the loop, construction on Wacker, a delivery truck blocking half of Michigan Avenue in the particular way that delivery trucks had blocked half of Michigan Avenue every morning since Elias was a teenager, and that apparently would continue until the end of time. He pulled up to the Caldwell building. It was a glass tower, 50-something floors of it, the kind of building that had been designed to impress and succeeded. Elias had cleaned windows on the 20th through 28th floors twice in the past year. Both times he'd done the work without allowing himself to think too hard about whose name was on the building directory. There was a discipline to that kind of compartmentalization. He'd gotten good at it. Maya was already unbuckling. "Hey." He touched her arm. She turned. And for a moment in the close space of the car, with the city moving past them, she was just his kid. 21 years old and trying hard, carrying things no 21-year-old should have to carry, doing it anyway, doing it well. She would have been so proud of you, he said. I need you to know that. Whatever today is, whatever this building is or isn't, she would have been standing outside it this morning so happy she couldn't stand herself. Maya's expression did something complicated. Her jaw worked. Her eyes went briefly bright, and then she blinked it back, composed, controlled, Sarah's daughter all the way down. Okay, she said. Just that. Then she squeezed his arm once, hard, and got out of the car. He watched her go through the revolving doors, watched her cross the marble lobby, portfolio bag straight on her shoulder, head up, moving like she belonged there. She did belong there. That was the thing Eleanor Sterling had spent 20 years trying to prevent, and she had failed completely. Elias sat in the car for a moment. Then he turned off the engine and went inside. He told himself he just wanted to see her make it to the elevator. That was all. Just to watch from the lobby. Make sure she got up without any trouble. 5 minutes? Then he'd leave. He never made it to 5 minutes. The lobby of the Caldwell building was the kind of space that announced loudly and without apology that the people who worked here occupied a different tier of existence than the people who cleaned here. 40 feet of veined marble flooring, glass walls that let in the morning light and turned it into something architectural. A waterfall installation, 14 feet high, running constantly, serving no purpose except to make the sound of money. Along the right wall, Elias had stood in enough of these lobbies to have developed a complex relationship with them. They were his workplace and his exclusion simultaneously. He cleaned their glass and was invisible inside it. He stood just past the revolving doors and scanned the lobby. Maya had already gone up. Good. He should leave. He didn't leave. Because something on the left wall had stopped every thought in his head. The founder's wall stretched nearly 80 feet. An enormous display of framed portraits, awards, photographs, the visual history of Sterling architects arranged with the careful intentionality of a museum exhibit. Founding documents, images of early projects, photos of office parties from the 1990s when everyone's hair was a decision they'd presumably regret. The company's growth rendered in glass and steel and smiling faces. And in the center of all of it, in a gold frame that was easily 4 feet by 3, lit by 2 dedicated spotlights that drew the eye from anywhere in the lobby. Elias Vance's late wife looked back at him. She was maybe 25 in the photograph. He recognized the age from a specific quality in her face, a fullness she'd had then, before the hard years, before the worry. She was wearing something white. Her hair was down. And she had that smile. Not the full one she'd give when something genuinely delighted her, but the quiet one, the reserved one, the one she kept for moments that mattered. Beneath the portrait, in brass lettering that had been polished until it caught the light, Sarah Sterling, 1972 to 2003. In memory of our lost light, Sterling. Her maiden name. The name she had walked away from. The name that belonged to the family who had called her a disgrace, who had cut her off without a cent, who had not sent flowers when she died and had not attended her funeral and had not once in 20 years called to ask how their granddaughter was doing. Sarah Sterling. Like she had never been Sarah Vance. Like Elias had never existed. Like Maya had never been born. Like the life she had chosen. The real life, the true life, the one built on love instead of money, had simply been edited out, and in its place they had installed this gold-framed, spotlit version of Sarah that they had always wanted. Theirs, preserved, owned, a corporate asset displayed in a lobby to make wealthy clients feel that Sterling Architects was a firm with heart. Something moved through Elias that had been building for 20 years. He walked past the security desk. The guard called after him. He heard the words, "Sir, and excuse me, and you need to sign in." And he kept walking. Not out of rudeness, but out of a kind of forward momentum that had nothing to do with choice anymore. He had been patient for 20 years. He had been quiet and careful, and he had raised his daughter, and he had done his work, and he had carried his grief like a professional. And right now, in this lobby, in front of this portrait, he had reached the end of patience. He found the elevator. He pressed the button for the top floor. His hands, he noticed, with the distant clarity of someone observing themselves from outside, were absolutely steady. The doors opened. He stepped in. What nobody on that elevator would have had any way of knowing was that upstairs, in the corner office on the 42nd floor, a woman had already been alerted by the front desk that a man matching Elias Vance's description had bypassed security and was on his way up. And that woman had paused for exactly 3 seconds, and then she had said to her assistant, in a voice so calm it bordered on unsettling, "Let him come up, and clear my 10 o'clock. And then she had opened her bottom drawer and put her hand on an envelope she had been carrying for 20 years, and waited. The elevator doors opened, and Elias stepped out into a silence that felt expensive. A receptionist moved toward him immediately. "Sir, you can't—" "Olivia Sterling." His voice came out quiet, controlled, the way his father had taught him to say hard things, without theatrics, because dignity is the one thing nobody can steal unless you hand it over. "The woman in that portrait downstairs was my wife. I need 5 minutes." Something shifted in the receptionist's face. She picked up her phone, listened, then looked at him with an expression he couldn't read. "She'll see you," she said. "Last door on the left." He'd expected a fight. He'd expected lawyers, security, a corporate non-apology from someone in an expensive suit. He had not expected the door to be open. He pushed it. The corner office was clean and uncluttered, the space of someone who had real power and didn't need to perform it through furniture. Floor-to-ceiling windows, the lake gray and enormous in the distance. And standing behind the desk, turning from the window to face him, was a woman he had never seen before. Young, early 30s, dark hair, composed in that specific way of someone who has been waiting for a particular moment for a very long time, and is now watching it walk through the door. She had Sarah's nose. Elias went still. Not a resemblance. Not a family similarity you'd have to look for. The exact shape. The slight upturn at the end that he had kissed 10,000 times. "Mr. Vance," she said. "You look like her," he said. The words came before the thought. Something moved across her face, fast and painful. "I know." A pause. "I'm Olivia, Sarah's younger sister. I was 10 years old when she died. She used to call me Livy." Her voice held on all of it, but barely. "Please sit down." "I didn't come to sit down." He stepped fully into the room. "I came because I just walked through your lobby and saw my wife's face in a gold frame. My wife, the woman your family called a disgrace, who died without a single sterling present, without a phone call, without one flower at her funeral." His voice didn't break. It had been holding for 20 years. One more time wouldn't be the thing that cracked it. "And now she's downstairs with your family's name on her like she was always yours. She wasn't yours. You gave her up. She chose us." Olivia took every word without flinching, without reaching for a phone. "You're right," she said quietly. "Every single word of that is right." Then she walked to the credenza, opened the bottom drawer, and lifted out a manila envelope, old, cream-colored, the clasp worn soft with years of handling. She set it between them. "Sit down, Elias." First name. Gently. "What I'm about to tell you. Please sit down." He sat. He didn't know why. Something in her voice had lost its professional steadiness and become something younger. something that had been carrying weight for a very long time and was tired. "The morning Sarah died," Olivia began, "I was at the house. I used to hide in the alcove under the main staircase, a child's hiding spot. You could hear everything from there." She looked at her hands. "I had a little red tape recorder, a Christmas gift. I was recording birds that morning when I heard my mother's voice from the kitchen." Elias was completely still. She wasn't shouting. Mother never shouted. She did everything cold and quiet, which was always more frightening. She was speaking to Consuela, our housekeeper, and she was furious. Olivia's voice dropped. She was saying that Consuela had done it wrong, that she had given her specific instructions, that the coffee was supposed to go to him. She looked up. "To you, Elias." The room lost all its sound. She said she had given Consuela the digitalis herself. She said she had told her exactly which cup. Olivia's voice was shaking now, barely, like something vibrating beneath still water. And then she said, and I've heard these words in my sleep for 20 years. She said, "You killed the wrong one." Elias could not speak, could not move. 5 words. "You killed the wrong one." "Your mother," he said. The words came from somewhere distant. "She poisoned my coffee." "Yes." "And Sarah drank it instead." Olivia's voice broke on the last word. "I am so sorry." And then from somewhere deep inside, the 20 years of not knowing, the death certificate that said natural complications, the grief he'd worn like a second skin, the mornings he couldn't look at a coffee cup without his chest tightening. The truth arrived in his body like a physical thing. "She had morning sickness," he said. His voice was barely there. "She never drank coffee. She hated the smell of it when she was pregnant, but that morning she was nauseated and He stopped, put his fist against his mouth. "I told her to try it. I said sometimes it helps." His head dropped forward. "She drank it because I told her to." "Elias." Olivia's voice was fierce and immediate. "It was not your fault. It was never your fault. You are not allowed to carry that. You could not have known." He knew that. He would tell himself that every day for the rest of his life. It didn't stop what happened inside his chest. He wept. Quietly, with his face in his hands, in the office of a woman he'd walked in ready to hate. 20 years of held-together grief cracking open all at once. Olivia put her hand on his arm and left it there without a word. It was the most human thing anyone had done for him in years. When he finally lifted his head, the light in the room had shifted. "The tape is in there," Olivia said, nodding at the envelope. "The original, digitally preserved, forensically certified, along with a signed statement from Consuela Reyes. She's 74 now. She came forward 6 years ago. Said she didn't want to die holding it." "How long have you been building this?" 11 years. She said it simply. "I left this family at 19, built this firm from nothing, put Sarah's name on the wall because I refused to let my mother's version of her be the one that stood. The version where she was a mistake to be managed." Her jaw tightened. "And I waited until Maya was 21, so that what I'm about to offer her cannot be legally contested." He looked at her. "I'm transferring controlling interest of this company to a trust," Olivia said. "Maya is the primary beneficiary, everything built under the Sterling name. Every dollar, every building, every contract goes to Sarah's daughter." A pause. "And to you." The silence was enormous. Somewhere below them, Maya was at a drafting table, beginning her future. 20 floors beneath the truth that had been waiting to find her. "She should hear this," Elias said, "right now. From both of us." Maya listened to all of it without interrupting. When Olivia finished, Maya sat quietly for a long moment. Then she looked at her father, and what passed between them in that look was everything. 20 years of a life built in the rubble of what Eleanor Sterling had done. "I want to be there," Maya said. "When you tell her, I want her to look at me." Eleanor arrived at 2 o'clock. She was smaller than Elias remembered. Age had compressed her, though she still wore her posture like armor. She walked into the boardroom with her chin up and her eyes moving quickly. And then they found Maya. And Eleanor Sterling's composure, for the first time in Elias's experience of her, simply left her face, because Maya had Sarah's face. Fully, unmistakably, and Eleanor was looking at her dead daughter, 21 years old and standing across a table from her, alive in the child she had never been permitted to know. Her hand found the back of a chair. Olivia laid the envelope on the table. "I was 10 years old. I was under the stairs, and I had a tape recorder." She paused. "The district attorney's office receives their copy at 3 o'clock. Eleanor said nothing. The blood had left her face completely. "You had a daughter," Maya said. Her voice was calm and clear and cost her something. Elias could see it costing her, but she didn't waver. "She loved you. She left because she loved someone you couldn't accept, and instead of letting her go with dignity, you tried to kill her husband. And you killed her instead. And I grew up without a mother." She held Eleanor's gaze. "I'm not going to tell you I hate you. I just think you are the saddest thing I've ever seen, because you had real love in your life, and you burned it to the ground, and you have been standing in those ashes ever since, pretending it was a decision you're proud of." Eleanor opened her mouth, closed it. "She was my daughter," Eleanor said finally. Her voice was a fraction of what it had been. Something had gone out of it, permanently. "Yes," Elias said. His first words in that room. Quiet and final. "She was. And you killed her." The officers arrived at 2:47. Eleanor straightened her coat when they came in, lifted her chin. Even now, performing dignity, and there was something so deeply tragic about that, Elias thought, that he could almost feel something for her. Almost. At the door she stopped, turned, and looked at Elias. Fully, directly, without the contempt she'd always used to keep him at a distance. He saw grief in her face. Old grief. The kind that had curdled over decades into bitterness because she hadn't known what else to do with it. She said nothing. There was nothing left to say. They let her out. The balcony off the 42nd floor had a view of the lake that was genuinely breathtaking in the late afternoon light. Copper water stretching to the horizon. The city humming below them, Chicago doing what Chicago always did, moving forward, indifferent and magnificent. Elias and Maya stood together at the railing. She'd been quiet since the room emptied. "She never got to see this," Maya said. "No. She never got to see that we made it." Elias looked at his daughter, Sarah's cheekbones, Sarah's eyes, his own stubbornness written into every line of her, and felt something move through him that for once wasn't grief. Or wasn't only grief. It was grief and gratitude pressed together, the bittersweet, specific weight of a life that had been hard and real and worth it. "She knows," he said. Maya took his arm, leaned into him. He pulled her close. He looked up at the sky, not performing it. Just a man looking up. The way you look at something when you want to show it to someone who went somewhere you can't follow yet. "We made it, Sarah," he said quietly. "Our girl made it. We're home." The wind came off the lake, warm, inexplicably warm for February, and moved through them and moved on. Below them, the city kept going, full of people carrying invisible weight, climbing toward something they weren't sure existed, doing it anyway, the way Elias Vance had always done it, the way love, when it's real, always does. 6 months later, the lettering above the Caldwell Building's entrance was quietly changed. It now read, "Vance and Sterling." Built in her memory. Maya designed the logo herself. The end.